Hello, good evening, a warm welcome. Thanks for joining this week's Tiger Bite, bringing you all the news, and most of it sadly appears to be of the bad variety, around Glasgow Speedway. I'm Derek Smith, and once again separated by distance and intellect from Speedway Stars Glasgow correspondent, Brian Copeland. Hello, Brian.
Good evening, Derek. I won't try and prove you wrong there by giving you a clever quip.
That's open to interpretation, that comment, Brian. Brian, as ever, and we never have any less to talk about, do we? We've got a full agenda of items of topics to chat through tonight. And first and foremost, we'll try not to upset any Tiger Bite guests or indeed anyone tonight. And Brian, we're going to run through an update on the current injury plight, which appears to be by the day ever growing around the Glasgow scene, and threatens our end of season push. We'll take a look back at Tigers' fortunes home and away over the past 7 days or so, and look ahead to this week's double dose of Ashfield action as Workington and Scunthorpe come calling on Thursday and Saturday night. And helping us preview the action, we'll hear in the course of Tiger Bite from Tom Perry and also from Scunthorpe's Ryan Douglas. Ryan, first and foremost, I think undoubtedly, unquestionably, this past 7 days or so in totality has been the toughest week of the season for all concerned with Glasgow Speedway. You appear to have a growing injury list and a sequence of results, performances perhaps, which aren't to everyone's liking around the club. Overall, I guess, we're all a bit shell-shocked, Brian.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think anyone could see what was coming. Obviously, we started last week with the news about Nike, and then, of course, Dan took a bit of a knock as well in the bank holiday meetings down at Bellevue, and that put him out of our fixtures over the last few days. But then, of course, his injury seems to have been aggravated by him riding at the weekend, so on British under-21 duty. And coupled that with some bad results for the team. Obviously, we went to Sheffield last Thursday, were comprehensively beaten, and then they came up the road on Saturday and overturned the 12-point deficit to beat us on our home turf. So I think the only bright spot out of all of that was our taking of a point at Peterborough on Sunday, when the guys seemed to have a bit of reaction, a bit of a good reaction to Saturday night's result, and that was probably the one positive. And then, of course, we get to last night, and Tom Perry takes a curler at Wolves, and we get the news today that he's done some damage to his ribs and his arm, and I think it's looking like an indefinite spell on the sidelines for him as well, and we just don't know whether he'll be back this season either, along with Nike. And so, yeah, it's not been a 7 days to boast about for Glasgow, that's for sure.
It's not been a good news week at all, Brian. Well, let's chip through in a little bit more detail all of what you've just paraphrased, Brian. So first and foremost, let's have an update on the injury front. So Nike Luna, as you mentioned, was injured a week or so ago in Sweden. Initial headlines suggested that we weren't likely to see Nike on a bike anytime soon, certainly not this season. But that appears to be a moving position.
Yeah, there's no definite on Nike's injuries either way yet, but I do know he's been seeing some specialists in his home country of Finland. He obviously took the injury in Sweden and had to travel back to his home country last week. And at that point, when I spoke to him, he was, waiting to speak to some more medics about his situation. There was a suggestion that he possibly hadn't broken any bones in his back, but I think that's still being worked out, and it's obviously a difficult injury to assess. So we kind of await further news on that. For the latest that I'd heard was that he was meant to be seeing another specialist possibly in the middle of this week. So around about now, we'd probably expect a little bit of an update. So here's hoping that it's good news. I know if Nike can, he will be back on a bike before the end of the season. He's not one to hang around when it comes to returning from an injury. And I know that Stuart would be desperate to get him back as well, as are the other riders. So that's the latest on Nike's position.
Fingers crossed to you, Nike, and belated happy 21st birthday also, Nike. Hopefully get some good news come through from Finland before the end of the week. Okay, Dan Bewley, you mentioned Dan, Brian, and Bellevue and Glasgow are desperate to get Dan fit and well and back into our side respectively. And the medical issue for Dan appears to be a strained hip flexor. Who knew we had one of those, Brian? Never mind two.
Yeah, I don't think Dan knew he had one of those either, but he managed to injure it somehow. I don't think he quite knows how he did it either. But it's just one of these things. If you're riding a bike at 60 or 70 miles an hour without any brakes, then it's going to have some impact on your body from time to time. So, yeah, he initially injured that at Bellevue, riding for Bellevue during the bank holiday meetings. That put him out of Sheffield. And as I mentioned, he was in Poland on Saturday night, riding for the Britain under-21 squad in the World Cup there. And he had to pull out, I think, after a lap. So back on the sidelines again. I think he's looking to get a bit of treatment on that. I think we're looking at about a week at least for Dan. So whether he'll make next Wednesday against Ipswich, I don't know. At the moment, he's out of the next two home meetings. And I certainly know that it was mentioned in the Sky match on Monday night that Nigel Pearson mentioning that he'd heard that Dan was certainly intending to be back for Bellevue's playoff push. So I'd imagine that that'll be the target for Dan in terms of Glasgow as well. And he'll be frustrated because he's not had a home meeting for a good while for Glasgow, and he'll be desperate to get back on a bike.
I was going to say that, as Glasgow fans haven't seen very much of Dan in quite a number of weeks for various different reasons, and to reintroduce Dan in a week's time, if that's the case, would be a potent addition to our end of season push, wouldn't it?
It'd be massive, yeah. He's been a bit of a revelation. We knew he potentially would be this season. He showed huge potential last year. We thought we might need a bit more time, but he hit the ground running this year. And to have a second string like him in the team, he can go out and beat anyone on his day. And he's still such a young man. But he's got a huge amount of potential. And just desperate to see him back. He's entertaining as well, and that's a big part of it. So we'd love to see him back at Ashfield.
And the most recent and final, thankfully, casualty is young Tom Perry, who of course was guesting last night for Swindon in a couple of meetings. I think it was Swindon, but a couple of meetings at Wolverhampton last night. That might not quite be the case. And 2 broken ribs and tendon damage in his arm appears to be the prognosis.
He would have been desperate to be involved in the business end of the season, both with us and obviously he rides for Cradley in the National League as well. He'd be wanting to be racing for them as well. He had been in good form for them of late. So just unfortunate. It was. I don't think it was anything to do with the fact he was riding in a double header. It was just pure luck and got caught up in a first bend incident, and that's what happened. So you're just hoping that he can heal quick as well. Obviously, Stuart will now be considering his options and what those are. I don't quite know at this stage in terms of replacing or filling Tom's position in the team. It's obviously a crucial place at reserve, and I think there's only a handful or even fewer than that of riders that would actually fit his average to go in at reserve. So we'll just have to wait and see in that front.
Yep, and at the time of recording TIGERBITE, we await news of Tom's replacement for this Thursday's meeting against Workington. Okay, Brian, let's move away from the injury news, as devastating as all that is, and move on to some results over the past 7 days. And not much much brighter news on the result front, but it is what it is, and we've got to respond to this. So a week ago, we previewed Tigers' trip to Sheffield, which was always going to be a tough ask. And for the majority of that meeting, up until the end of Heat 12, in fact, Glasgow Tigers were pretty much hanging in there.
Yeah, if we finished the match at 12 heats, we would have come away with a point. I think we'd kept it to within 6 or so up until that point. So perhaps the last 3 heats were a bit of an unfair reflection of our overall performance. 3-5-1s at any point in the meeting is going to make it look bad, putting a 12-point gap between you and the other team. So, yeah, unfortunate that we just didn't have that final punch that we normally do. We usually finish meetings quite well with, heats 13 and 15. We've kind of lacked that in the last few weeks, and that kind of showed on Thursday night. And I think that probably was then again reflected on Saturday night when we again just didn't have that potency that we needed at the end of the meeting to kind of stop Sheffield's charge when that came along at Ashfield on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you're right. Those big heats, 13 and 15 in particular, didn't go our way at Sheffield last Thursday, and the home Tigers stretched away and in the end took a fairly comfortable win. No points gained by the Tigers. Some impressive displays, though, nonetheless, within the Glasgow camp. Young Jack Smith had a rip-roaring beating around the track that he obviously enjoys. And the Tigers' guest, former Tiger in fact, Mason Campton, top scored with 10 points. So credit to Stuart for bringing Mason in last Thursday.
Yeah, he proved to be a good guest, and we can actually. I think I said that last week. We were kind of unsure as to whether he would, it would make a difference being without Dan at that meeting, but we did think that Mason was capable of a big performance. He's had some good showings this season, and so it proved. So it's obviously a track that he likes. And like you mentioned, Jack Smith, he's still not quite fully got to grips, I would suggest, with the home track yet. He's still got a bit of work to do at Ashfield, but I think his away form of late has been pretty good, and both for Bellevue and for Glasgow, he's impressed and been putting on a few decent points at the bottom end of the team and doing his job.
So looking at that final score at Owlerton last Thursday night, absolutely not what any Glasgow fan would want to have seen. But take away those final 3 heats. I know that's a convenient thing to say, Brian, but if Glasgow had to return to Owlerton before the end of the season and whatever meeting, I still think there's some positives that we can take from that. And you might question, could we perform quite as poorly again over those final heats?
Well, that's it. You would hope that the heat leaders who've probably by their own mission been struggling for a little bit of form in the last couple of weeks, they wouldn't be as poor as they were, and they'd be desperate to go there and make amends. So yeah, I think if we go there again, it'll be a different meeting and probably a different result as well.
So if Thursday night's scoreline, Brian, final scoreline, wasn't entirely surprising and wasn't overly concerning, we of course both sides regrouped at Ashfield on Saturday night. And hours probably before start time on Saturday, we learned that Sheffield had been forced into some team changes, borrowing some couple of local juniors to make up their 6 riders. They operated rider replacement for Lassie Bier as well. Brought in Lewis Kerr as a guest, but really only had 4, including Lewis Kerr, Sheffield riders on Saturday night. And things started briskly and brightly enough for the home side. We stretched into a 12-point lead, I think, at one point. And of course, all of that was rather shockingly undone in the second half of the meeting.
It was, yeah. I think the Heat 8, I think it was, or Heat 9, where Sheffield got the 7-2, gave them a bit of renewed vigour. And I think the fact that Josh Grzonek had rides in Heat 11, 13 and 15, and he was just untouchable on Saturday night. Even we couldn't see that coming. Even though you knew that Josh had 3 rides to take, you still couldn't see Sheffield getting back into it. You just didn't feel as though they had enough backup for their top 2. Yeah. But I think it was that second half of the meeting that Jan Graverson down at reserve started to pick up some more points, and Lewis Kerr went out and got 2 wins on the trot. I think he beat Aaron Summers possibly twice, actually. I might be doing Aaron a disservice there. I don't have the score sheet in front of me, but from memory, he certainly got a couple of scalps, home heat leader scalps, Lewis Kerr. And all of a sudden, that just thrust them straight back into things. And when they had 13 and 15 with Howarth and Grzonek and the form that they were on, by that point, you were fearing the worst. And our worst fears were confirmed in Heat 15 when I think we went out and got a 4-2, and that was it. Took 3 points in the meeting. We left with none. And a bit of a sort of upset in that respect, a bit of a shock. But I guess it just goes to prove you can't be complacent about any meeting, no matter what the lineup.
No, I agree with you, Brian, and I'm not sure whether to any stretch of the imagination our lads were complacent at all. But I remember looking at the programme deep into the second half of the meeting on Saturday night, and Glasgow had only run 4 last places. We had a spread of heat winners, etc., and it didn't look like there was anything to be overly concerned about. But that rearguard action from Grzonek and Howarth and Graverson in particular, and Lewis Kerr, of course, he scored 10 points on Saturday night, was you've got to pay credit where credit's due. And it was an admirable performance by those 4 riders in the Sheffield race jackets. And they were on the ascendant, as you mentioned, and sometimes that's difficult to stop when a team has built up, no matter how many riders that team is made up of, has built up that head of steam. It's difficult to stop sometimes. Yeah,
it can be, and I think we'll struggle to see a more impressive heat leader performance than Grzonek and Howarth, to be honest. I think that, particularly Josh Grzonek, I think just out the starts, he didn't really have to trouble himself, to be honest, at any point. So I think we'd struggle to see better performances than that from a top 2 throughout the season. And you just hope that next time they come, if they come, they're not in that kind of form.
Absolutely, and I think everyone, including the Sheffield fans who'd made the long journey on Saturday, left rather shell-shocked from the stadium. One thing I would say, Brian, and in terms of the league standings, Sheffield, I think, have pretty much cemented that top spot. Glasgow, I'm fairly certain, have cemented a playoff place. And so in terms of the damage that home defeat has on Glasgow's season, I would suggest that's probably minimal. However, the greater concern perhaps is the manner of the scoreline being reversed on Saturday, and any lasting psychological damage, in a sporting sense.
Yeah, that's perhaps a bit of a hit to confidence. That's one way you could look at it. And saying that, when I spoke to Aaron Summers in the aftermath of Sunday's match at Peterborough, and he said, I don't think there were any sort of confidence issues after the meeting. I think he just sort of he said the guys realised they shouldn't have lost that, and they just kind of took it on the chin and tried to make amends on Sunday. And I suppose they went and did that when by taking a point at Peterborough. So they seem like a resilient bunch. You just have to hope that these wee bits chipping away at them doesn't eat away at the confidence gradually, rather than taking one big hit from that one particular result.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Brian. And again, credit where credit's due this time to the home camp, because we did travel to Peterborough the following day. Probably didn't expect to take anything or very much from that meeting, a meeting which was curtailed after 11 heats, but a much stronger performance by the top end of the team, and another league point claimed.
Yeah, each of the heat leaders got a win, or a couple of wins each, I think, and perhaps would have gone on. I know there was some people commented to say that Glasgow would have actually won the match had they gone on and completed it. So that's a bit of a compliment, and it just shows, even though Peterborough were arguably a stronger side, they had Scott Nicholls at number 1 and Chris Harris at number 5. Look at that for a 1 and 5, and yet Scott Nicholls went out and got 2 5-1s with Simon Lambert, and we were still within 4 points of them. So there's 8 points that he put on, over us, with Simon Lambert in 2 races, and we still managed to keep it to within 4 with 4 heats to go. So, I think that those figures speak for themselves, and I think that shows that there was a bit of fight in the guys on Sunday, a track that we've been notoriously bad at, to be honest, in the last couple of years.
Yep. So a Jekyll and Hyde performance over the past week or so from the Tigers. Let's look forward now to a busy couple of days coming up at Ashfield. So home meetings on Thursday night against Workington Comets, tapes up at 7:30, and then on Saturday with the visit by Scunthorpe, tapes up reverting to 7 o'clock on Saturday. So Thursday, first of all, a full strength, pretty much, Comets side will come to Ashfield, and they will be, I guess, encouraged by last Saturday's home defeat. But given the slight rally down at Peterborough on Sunday, camp would be looking to get straight back on track.
I think these two teams will go into it with a bit of confidence now. Glasgow, from the result at Peterborough, Workington had a big win at home on Saturday night to Peterborough, against Peterborough, sorry. I think they racked up a fair amount of points. So when you look at the Workington side, there's a few guys in there that could do us a wee bit of damage. Craig Cook obviously is the obvious one, but they've got James Sargent down at reserve. We mentioned Mason Campton earlier in the show. There's a few guys, Thomas Jorgensen as well. He's been in good form this season. So you look at 4 guys there straight away that could come and do something, and that's without mentioning guys like Ty Proctor as well. So could be quite a tasty match on Thursday. I think it is one that we really need to go out and from the off stamp our authority and put down a marker and show people that we're still in this title race. So, but I think it could be a good match, and I think Workington will put up a decent fight.
So Tigers operate rider replacement for Nike Luna on Thursday night, and bring in Edinburgh's Josh Pickering, who's impressed on a couple of guest appearances already this season for Dan Bewley. And as I mentioned earlier, we currently await news on the reserve to replace Tom Perry. And if you can't make it along on Thursday night, and hopefully you can, some midweek speedway is always a bit of a rarity in these parts. We all do it again on Saturday night. Tapes up at 7 o'clock with the arrival at Ashfield of another youthful-looking Scunthorpe side, Brian.
Yeah, they've not had the best of seasons, but of course, Ryan Douglas, who we'll hear from in a minute, has obviously guested for us on quite a few occasions at home, and usually post pretty decent scores. Paid 10 on Saturday night, including a win and a couple other decent performances. So yeah, they've got guys in their ranks again that can do us some damage, and they've probably got nothing to lose. They're not really racing for anything at this stage, Scunthorpe. So they'll come up here just quite keen to put one over us because we are a big name and a bit of a scalp. So again, as we saw on Saturday, we can't afford to have any complacency at all, and I think we'll just need to be on our game again. Having a home meeting 48 hours beforehand should help, though.
Kyle Newman steps in to replace Dan Bewley in the Glasgow camp on Saturday. Brian, you've mentioned Ryan Douglas, and a little earlier on we managed to catch up with him. Okay, now on TIGERBITE, we're delighted to be joined by one of Glasgow's very favourite guest riders this season, indeed, Ryan Douglas of Scunthorpe Scorpions. Good evening to you, Ryan.
Good evening.
How's your week going?
Yeah, it's not too bad. It was not been up too much, just getting bikes ready for a busy weekend. So just doing that, and looking forward to the racing on the weekend.
Cool. So once again, Ryan, you're going to point the van the van north to Glasgow on Saturday night for the second successive Saturday. You picked up a couple of guest bookings at Ashfield this season. I think you've been probably 3 or 4 times in total. Is the Glasgow circuit one that you have always relished racing on, the one you've looked forward to, that suits your style, or have you had to learn it this year?
Yeah, I think previous years hasn't been my best track, and I've come back this year and just really enjoyed riding it. I think it's changed a bit the way they've prepared it, and the way that it also just been at the track, the way that the pits are now and where you can watch and stuff. It's improved a lot, and I've scored a good meeting there at the start of the year, and to get a guest booking, I think a couple of months ago maybe, and I had another good meeting, and to have another one the other day, it was still a decent meeting. So definitely can say it's one of my better tracks to guest at now.
Just remember on Saturday night, Ryan, you've got to go to the other side of the pits, yeah?
Yeah, I'll try to remember that one.
Ryan, there's obviously been a lot of change at Glasgow over the last couple of seasons. You've been in the UK for a few years now. You mentioned the setup of the track's a little bit different this year. What changes have you noticed at Ashfield, both on and off the track, and what do you make of them?
I think the biggest thing on the track is just maybe a bit different dirt or something. It just seems to be a lot more consistent to ride and very smooth. So it's good for the riders. You can go out there and give it your all and not worried about holes in the track or inconsistency in the track. And off the track, probably the pits for me is the biggest thing. It's got to be one of the best pits in the league now, with the way you got your own bay and everything. It's definitely enjoyable to be there.
So far, Ryan, in your guest bookings, at least this season for Tigers, you've scored 6+1 against Ipswich and 8+2 last Saturday night against a tough Sheffield side. You do know that you're not allowed to score any more than that this Saturday. That's the rules.
Hopefully it'll be pretty similar, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, on Saturday night, Ryan, you were obviously facing a Sheffield team that came back from the dead, really, and beat us. But you had a good meeting, paid 10 points. You must be pretty pleased with your points haul, even though the team didn't quite make it in the end.
Yeah, exactly. It was, when you looked at it on paper at the start of the meeting, you never would have thought that would have been the result. So I just concentrated on my own thing and had a pretty decent meeting. Got excluded from one ride. I didn't know really why I got excluded, but took it on the chin and still got some decent points. So I was pretty happy in the end with it for myself.
Ryan, it's been another tough season for Scunthorpe, on the back of last season as well, of course. Quite a number of home defeats in the league this year, although you have picked up a few points away from home. If it's not being given away any secrets, what's the mood typically in the Scunthorpe camp amongst the riders?
It's all right, really. It's obviously not been a great season for us, but it's all the boys are pretty positive. We don't seem to dwell on the meetings too much. Like every day is a new day, so we just turn up every week and give it our all. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do. You can't sit there thinking, "Oh, we should have won that. We should have done this," and it's probably only going to make you worse. So you turn up to each meeting as a new day and a new opportunity to do well, and that's what we do.
That's how I try to live my life, Ryan.
Of course, at the start of the season, Ryan, the Scunthorpe team that started was the same one that had ended last year, which is quite an unusual move in Speedway. We don't see that an awful lot. Did that help at all in terms of helping you guys settle in quicker with team morale? You obviously knew each other already.
Yeah, I think it did help a bit, but for some reason it just didn't happen at the start of the year. Like myself as well, had an injury in the off season, and I started slow and was riding one of those new GTR engines and just couldn't get it to work for me. So it was a slow start for myself and a few of the other boys. So obviously with the team not doing well, team changes probably had to be made, and we changed a few different people, and it's kind of been not a bad end to the season now after getting a few people getting going, but it's still not where we'd want to be on the table.
Ryan, my apologies for my poor research before this interview. Keep me straight. How many seasons have you done in the UK now? And Scunthorpe's always been your UK club, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've been here since 2013, so it's my 5th season, I think. And I've had a few like late starts and a few seasons where one season I did about 10 matches or something because I was injured for most of the season. But I've had not the best run, but I'm starting to feel a bit better on the bike again now, and hopefully can finish the season good.
So where do you feel you are in your career personally at the moment, Ryan? We see a lot of you guys coming across from Australia, and you like to make the UK your home and progress through the ranks in Britain before going on to bigger things. So where do you see yourself in that at the moment, and what's the sort of plans over the next couple of years should you return?
It's going okay. I would rather be doubling up and be going a bit further at the moment, but I guess it just hasn't worked out that way. I've had a few good seasons, but haven't been able to get a double up spot. And with injuries, I've had a bad run with breaking my femur and my back, and did 3 ligaments in my knee once in Australia. And it's just always, when I started to get going, it just seemed always injury come at the wrong time. So it's held me back a little bit, but I'm kind of moving past it now. And I'm hoping next year or so if I come back and just keep progressing and get that more rides is the main thing, and maybe go abroad, something like that, and just more time on the bike. Really, it's not quite enough just doing the one league. You're riding once a week a lot of the time, so it's not really enough to improve as much as you'd like.
Any Scottish ancestry, Ryan? Douglas occurs to me. It sounds like quite a Scottish sounding surname.
Yeah, I do, but it's too far back, so it doesn't help me for that kind of thing.
You can talk the language though, that helps.
Well, talking of nationalities and things, Ryan, I think I saw a little bit earlier this season there was some mention of obviously there's been issues to do with visas and things that some of you guys have to work through when you're racing here. Is that an issue for yourself? Because I did hear mention that you perhaps have to achieve a certain average. Is that still the case, or is that been sorted out now?
Yeah, it's still a big factor with me for next year. I'm not sure exactly yet what I can do to come back next year. There is a possibility I might have to have 12 months out, but we're looking to see all avenues and see maybe where I can find a way to find a visa, get a visa for next year. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
So Ryan, obviously you'll be looking to finish the season strongly on a personal level, and with one eye on Scunthorpe's trip to Glasgow on Saturday. What will you be telling your Scorpion teammates on Saturday? What tips will you be passing on to them?
I'll just tell them it's just to enjoy it, really, and it's a good track. Like, you can go and attack it and not worry about some tracks you go to. You got to be a bit cautious where you can just attack it and enjoy it. And I've obviously seen it's possible to beat the Glasgow boys at home firsthand. I was there, so if we can come with the same mindset as Sheffield and just give it our all and run them hard, and at the end of the meeting, anything can happen.
Of course, you don't really have anything to race for as a team anymore in terms of trophies in the league. As far as the league's concerned, does that mean you can just go into these kind of meetings with a bit of pressure off? No one's perhaps expecting you to come to Glasgow and win it. Does that lack of pressure help at all when you're on the bike?
Yeah, I think it does a bit, but as well as for Glasgow, the pressure probably can help them as well. They know it's a must-win meeting, where for us, sometimes maybe if the pressure's not there, you won't go for something because it's not a must-win kind of thing. But I always give 100%, no matter if I'm riding for Scunthorpe or for anyone. I'm out there just to do my best, and it's still a payday for yourself, no matter what the team does, or it's all you still got to do well for yourself and make a good name for yourself.
Well, Ryan, regardless of what happens this Saturday night, thank you very much for your efforts on behalf of Glasgow Speedway earlier this season, and good luck to you over the course of the remainder of this season, and of course in respect of securing a return trip to the UK in 2018. Thanks very much for joining us on TIGERBITE.
Cheers, guys. No worries. Thank you.
Ryan Douglas, Brian, a nice young lad, and as you mentioned earlier, he's guested a couple of times for the Tigers and done rather well for us. So interesting to hear his thoughts about Glasgow and his like for the track.
Yeah, he's proven to be one of those riders that we kind of rely on from time to time. When we need a guest, I think we've had a few of them down the years. So and he seems to like it. He obviously enjoys riding up at Glasgow, so it's good to see. And you never know whether we might see him in a Glasgow race jacket a bit more often in the future.
Okay, Brian, I think that just about covers off the speed, well, the track side of the business for tonight's TIGERBITE. Again, just a reminder, folks, that tickets are now available to you and on sale for both the end of season dance and awards night, Saturday 28th of October at the Marriott Hotel in the city centre. £40 for non-members and £38 for GTSG members. And also, we're only just over 2 weeks away now, just over a fortnight away from one of the most prestigious individual meetings ever to be staged in Glasgow, and certainly at Ashfield. It's the Individual Riders' Championship, with all the number ones from all the championship clubs fighting out around Ashfield. Tickets now on sale online and available from the Den. Brian, I think we're just about there. Just a reminder also, folks, to watch out for some TIGERBITE specials in the coming weeks. And we will be back on TIGERBITE in the early part of next week, because we have a midweek meeting, of course, against Ipswich. Brian and I will be back on Facebook and social media before then to cover off all this week's action. Until then, enjoy your week. See you at Ashfield on Thursday and Saturday. Take care. Good night.
Good night.